Hi everyone, I'm Jessie from The Lunatic, the Lover, and the Poet. I hope you enjoyed my article above, and I hope you'll stick with me, sorry, through this video. I'm going to try to keep it short, but I tend to be very verbose. I can't speak tonight, it's late, and I'm tired. I've had a really full day, so please forgive me. I hope you will stick with me through this video because I tend to be very verbose. For those of you who don't know what that means, wordy. I talk a lot. My mother wasn't named Chatty Cathy for nothing. What I'd like to do for you now is go ahead and answer the 3 questions that Hasty gave me to answer. The first one being, what does be real mean to you? When I saw this question, I was really excited because for the last 3 years since my dad passed away, it's what I've been doing or trying to do. The Hamlet quote that I gave you above in the article is one of my favorite lines from Shakespeare ever because it holds so much truth in it. And for the last 3 years, that's what I've been trying to live my life by. Before that time, I was coming up on 40, and I was a mom to 4 kids. I had been a wife. I was an ex-wife now, and I was in a relationship, a long-term relationship with the father of my 3 younger kids. And when you become a mom, you tend to lose your identity anyway. And for a very, very, very long time, I had felt lost to begin with. I don't think I ever knew who I was. I knew the person that I'd wanted to be, but I was nowhere near being that person. In fact, I had lost sight of her for a very, very long time. So I was coming up on being middle-aged. I was 175 pounds, and I felt worthless. I had thought, what have I contributed to society? What have I contributed to the world? And the answer was nothing. And it hit home when my dad passed away, because the thought went through my head, because I couldn't go be at his funeral due to personal circumstances. And it about killed me. And the thought occurred to me that my dad wasn't proud of me. And I'm sorry. It took me several months to come to the realization that my dad had always been proud of me. It was me who wasn't proud of me. So after he passed away, I took my life into my own hands for the first time ever, in my opinion. And I started walking down a new path. There is a saying I heard around this time that everyone has 2 lives, and the second one begins when you realize you have only one. My second life began after my dad passed away. What be real means to me is to be you. It's to be whoever that is. It is to be able to look yourself in the mirror every single day and try your very damnedest to be happy with that person. And if that means you have to look in your own eyes for a long time to see all the good that's in you, do it. If it means you need to put stickers up or take a magic marker and write on your bathroom mirror positive quotations or list your strengths, do it. It makes a big difference. Start surrounding yourself with positivity and lose as much negativity as you can. Because if you're unhappy, nothing else is going to make you happy except you. Positive thoughts help in that area. One of the things that I really have a trouble with is when people talk about what defines a person. Don't let anything define you. Don't let anyone define you. Because the truth is, those definitions are someone else's opinions about what and who you are. And you shouldn't let anyone tell you who you are. I have a quote that I have hanging up over my desk. I have an inspiration wall over above my desk where I put things to help me remember that I am worth something. And this definition, or this quotation, says, definitions belong to the definer, not the defined. Be the defined, or I'm sorry, don't be the defined, be you. Don't be a definer either. Be you. Treat people the way you want to be treated. I try to live my life by that because it holds true today no matter what else happens. And yes, you're going to get treated badly sometimes. The world's a hard place, and there are people who are probably going through harder things than you. Remember that, because your journey is not theirs, and their journey is not yours. Make yourself proud, because the people who matter are already proud of you. The second question Hasty asked for me to answer was, what do you think when people see a picture of you? I can't answer this question. I don't know. I don't know what you're going to see or what thoughts are going to go through your mind when you see my pictures above. To be honest, just like everybody else, whatever picture you're going to see of them, you're going to make snap decisions and judgments on. And hopefully, you'll see those with opened eyes. You'll allow yourself the permission, or you'll give yourself permission to look at a picture and say, this is not an accurate depiction of this person. This is not the only side this person has. Because people are layered, like Shrek says, like onions. And, well, maybe you do like cake. Some people like onions, some people don't like cake. I'm not a big cake person. I like pie. Pie's sort of layered, sort of. But, yeah, remember that. What I can tell you that I have been told and that I've experienced is that people underestimate me. When they see me, especially if I let my hair grow out naturally blonde, I get underestimated all the time. I'm not supposed to be smart. I'm not supposed to be funny. I'm supposed to have an empty head, apparently. I sat in an army recruiting base and heard every single blonde joke there is. And I laughed it off and even added some of my own that they hadn't heard. So I know one thing. I am so much more than people guess. So I use that sometimes. Their underestimation of me, it can be a powerful tool. And I have used that ability. Not in a bad way, but to prove to people, I'm not what you think I am. I don't know if you're going to see me in this video differently than in my pictures. I can guess that you are because you're going to see a whole lot more of my personality here. But you're not going to see that in a picture, which is the whole point of why I wanted to do a video. We are all just cracked people. We're cracked beings. We have problems. We have faults. But we shouldn't make judgments. It's hard enough as it is. Just being yourself. And it isn't easy to try to change your whole perspective. So start with one little thing. And that's just open your heart. Okay? One of the things I said in a video I did on my own blog was that we have to be the change. If we want our children to grow up in a better world, we have to show them the way. It has to start with us. We can't expect them to change and be people that we want to see if we don't show them how. And it starts here. It starts now. It starts with you being you. It starts with you being real. It starts with not looking at a picture of a person and letting that be the only impression you ever get from them. The last question Hasty asked was, what would people be most surprised to learn about you? This is the second video that I am doing for Hasty. In the first one, it was rushed. I really didn't think overly hard. I pretty much flew by the seat of my pants. And in that one, I actually I talked about how I was molested by my stepdad when I was younger. I'm not going to talk about that. I don't want to talk about it. Not because I'm ashamed of it, but because it was so mild. And there are a lot other people have experienced so much worse. To be honest, I wanted to talk about something a little more important that hits closer to home to me than that. And it's something that quite recently has been hitting closer to home than normal. I have a deadline mid-August for a short story that I'm supposed to write. During one weekend, I got to experience trying to help someone through a very rough time. And it's not the first time I've had to do that. I spent one full night up all night talking to my best friend, keeping her company, seeing her through the dark to keep her from committing suicide. The story I am writing is, well, It's for a horror anthology. And I started writing the story, and my character is committing suicide. It's gonna have a twist to it, but I'm not sure how it's going to actually end up. That's why I decided to go to my library and I started doing a lot of research, or I've been doing a lot of research recently, like in the last 24 to 48 hours. But this isn't the first time suicide has touched my life. When I was 16, and I've mentioned it above in the article, my family lost all of our utilities except for our gas. We had no electricity. We would lose our water and sewage utilities for a couple of weeks at a time. We'd pay the bill and they would be turned back on or reinstated. We had free lunches at school, and that included breakfasts. And that was the only meals we got during the day. And for me, because at the time this was going on, I was in high school. And I rode the bus. I didn't get to school on time to have breakfast. I would end up with lunch. So I would eat a full lunch and I'd still be hungry. And I had some really good friends who would end up buying me an extra burrito or, an extra snack or a Coke after school. I had friends who would let me spend the night at their house on a weekend because they knew what I was going through. I would go home at night and we might be able to have something edible at dinner time. But a lot of it was stale or rotten. We lived this way for 2 years. When I was 16, it started when I was 15, this whole situation. My stepdad, well, we know now he was bipolar. Back then we didn't. And he couldn't and wouldn't hold down a job. Even it came to a point where he told my mom that he didn't care to support to support her and his daughters, because they're my half-sisters, and me. He wasn't going to try to live up to anybody else's standards, which basically meant he didn't care. I ended up at 16 getting a job and helping my mom pay bills. My mom worked double shifts. One was a graveyard shift from midnight to 4 in the morning. From the time I was 16 to 17 years old, I saw my mom for a total of 2 hours a day. And that was it. My stepdad would leave and go away to his mother's house to stay there all day, where he could have food and he could smoke and drink coffee and lay around. It wasn't any wonder when he and my step-grandmother and a doctor brought my mom home and put her into her bed with a huge prescription of Valium, which I had to designate the pills to her so that she wouldn't overdose on them, because she drove her truck into a telephone pole at 60 miles an hour to kill herself. To this day, she still denies that happened. She still says that it was an accident, that she just ran off the road, that she hit a puddle, and none of that's true. I was 16. I remember very, very well. I mean, I was there when they brought her home. At that point, suicide was never a consideration for me, or at least I thought so. When I was pregnant with my third son, around 6 months along, I began suffering from severe depression. I didn't know it. I thought it was all due to stress because there was a lot going on in my life at the time. This story I haven't told to a lot of people because there are times when I'm still very, very, very much ashamed by it. Because I can't understand how I could possibly have even considered doing something to myself like this. Except that I really do understand. I understand better than anybody. Except maybe those who have gone through the same emotions. I had one very, very, very bad day in November. I had been having months of stress that could have been alleviated, but it was not my place to do so. And the one person who could had decided that wasn't going to happen. So enter November 9th of 2004. The day started off like crap. It didn't get any better. And it just seemed that all day long, anything bad that could happen not only did happen, but was my fault. And I had people in my life at that time who made sure I knew it was my fault. And they didn't care how I felt. They didn't care if I was pregnant. They didn't care to notice that something is incredibly wrong with her. She needs to get to a doctor. Nobody even thought about that. And I was alone. I had no one I could talk to. And I think that's probably the loneliest I have ever been in my life, was this night. By the time everybody was in bed, I was not in any state to be left alone. I felt worthless. I felt weak. I felt helpless. And I felt people would be better off if I just didn't exist. Especially the baby I was carrying. I sat in my kitchen. Everybody was asleep. My kids, the man who was supposed to love me, everybody. There was nobody. And it was really, really late. And I decided there was no one to stop me. So I took a knife, a very, very sharp one. I went into my bathroom. I got in the bathtub after I locked the door. And I sat there in the bathtub, looking at the knife, knowing exactly what I was going to do. I put the knife point to my wrist, knowing to go down the arm and not across. My hand started shaking. And then the baby kicked. And at the same time, I had this thought hit straight through my brain of my oldest son being the one to find me, because he would be the one first up, and the first person he always came to in the mornings was me. And suddenly, I couldn't go through with it. I got so sick at my stomach, I started throwing up, and I started crying. And then the thought hit about the fact that I wasn't going to be killing one life, I was going to be killing 2 kids. And it was the hardest thing I've ever had to go through. I never have gone through that again. I call that feeling the dark friend, and he's always with me. He's always there in the back of my brain. Whenever anything bad happens, whenever I start getting depressed, I always think, well, you know, people would be better off without me. And then I remember my 4 biggest and best and brightest reasons to live. And that stops me from thinking that every time. So that would be, I think, the most surprising thing anybody could ever learn about me. Because when you meet me and you get to know me, that's not the person you see. Either I am a really good actress, which I'm not, or you just begin to learn that I have a brighter personality than that. For the most part, I am a very happy person. I go through my days. I have terrible things sometimes that happen, but I try to stay positive. And I happen to be one of those people who I tend to feel very optimistic. And sometimes that doesn't come across, but I am. I believe in the basic good of people. I believe that society can do the right thing. But we are all scarred in some way. But we're not broken. We're not destroyed. So, I want to give you a few statistics about suicide that I've found out recently. People who attempt suicide differ from others in how they think, how they react to events, how they make decisions. They also differ in their aspects of memory, attention, planning, and emotion. The main risk factors are depression. Suicide is not a symptom of depression. Depression isn't, I don't think it's a disease, because I don't really think you can ever really be cured from depression. I think you learn how to deal with it in the best way that you can. A prior attempt is a risk factor, as well as family history of mental disorder or substance abuse, family history of suicide, family violence, including physical or sexual abuse, having guns or other firearms in the home, incarceration, and exposure to others' suicidal behavior, whether it's family, peers, or celebrities. Suicide often occurs with mental disorders, depression, substance use, anxiety, and psychosis. Also, obviously triggered by personal loss or violence. Men are more likely to die by suicide than women, but women are 3 times more likely to attempt suicide. Men choose deadlier forms of suicide, such as firearms or suffocation, while women tend to choose poisoning. Suicide is the second leading cause of death in persons 15 to 34. That number has actually increased in the last 10 years, I think is what I read. Older adults aged 65 plus used to have the leading rates for suicide for decades. That number has now actually become comparable to middle-aged people who commit suicide or attempt suicide. That's ages, what they consider middle age is 24 to 62-year-olds. Ethnic groups, in order of the highest rates: American Indians, Alaskan Natives, non-Hispanic whites, Hispanics, African Americans, and Asian Pacific Islanders. Their rates are half those of American Indians and Alaskan Natives and whites. The one thing you need to remember most is that suicide is not a normal reaction to stress. It is, it's a sign of extreme distress. It's not something people first consider when they normally handle just normal levels of stress, which is something that I've learned I have learned and am still learning how to deal with. I end up with anxiety attacks when I start to feel overwhelmed. And they're mild, but they're still pretty bad for me, in my opinion. I start to feel as if my breath is being crushed out of my body. My heart starts pounding. I start breathing quicker because I can't breathe. And I'll have days where I don't want to leave the house. I can't go out in public. I don't want to go to the grocery store. I don't want to go anywhere. And I have begun actually overcoming some of those anxiety attacks, which is good for me. I have written an article as of a few days ago. Today is August 3rd. I'm sorry, not August 3rd. August 7th. And so earlier this week, I wrote a post called When Research Goes Awry, or Why I'm Turning into a Saltwater Puddle. This would be why I turned into a saltwater puddle. It's because I'm having to deal with some emotions that I haven't dealt with fully since my son, my 10-year-old, was in my body. So I want to get this out there. I want people to know. I know what that feels like. And you can get help. There is all kinds of help available to you online. If you know someone who shows signs of suicide, I highly encourage you to try to get them some help. Read up on the subject. I provided a lot of links for you to go look at on my site through that post. And I have linked to the post above, so you should have easy access to them. And it includes the National Suicide Hotline number. Please. People need to know they're not alone, especially in the darkest hours when they feel most alone. I want to thank you for being kind enough to listen to this very long post, and I'm very sorry and I apologize profusely for taking so much of your time. But this is a subject I feel very, very passionate about. I would like to encourage you to be kind to people, because sometimes that may be the only kindness they experience. The music that you hear playing in the background, if you can hear any of it, is by one of my all-time favorite groups, which, go ahead and laugh at me all you want, but they've been producing music ever since the 80s. It's the band a-ha, who did the song Take On Me back in 1985. I have been a big fan ever since, and they're getting ready to release their latest album September 4th of 2015. It's called Cast in Steel. The first release from their album is called Under the Makeup, and I would encourage you to go listen to it. It's a beautiful song, and I think it's almost perfect for Be Real. I want to read you the first lines from the lyrics. This is how it ends, each on our own, unless we pretend. Meanwhile, our hearts turn to stone, shaped by wind, boulders slowly molded over time, here within. I want to see you under the makeup. Let all the worry vanish away. I want to hold you like it's the first time, like you were still mine. Thank you so much for bearing with me and getting through this with me. My heart goes out to any of you who are hurting or who just need someone to talk to. Find someone and talk to them. For the rest of you, be real, be you, and don't let anyone stop you.